Good day, I'm Jonathan Clayton from South Africa, working on the Hope Prison Ministry. It is extremely exciting to be part of the Restorative Justice World Conference, and I trust that we all will learn from one another. My topic today is about restorative justice and victim-offender dialogue process in custodial settings, healing the wounds of crime. Yes, we need this in South Africa because of the crime rate that is increasing in our country, the brutality of crime, and also the aggressiveness during the time that the crime was committed, but also the challenges of verbal, sexual, and emotional and physical abuse against women and children in our country. With me on this journey is the Reverend Jenny Clayton, my dear loving wife, and we are the founders and executive directors of Hope Prison Ministry. All other credentials, you can read about that, it's there, but I'm not going to focus on that because that is not so important. We are fascinated and excited about our journey with the Department of Correctional Services in South Africa, who want to see prisons changing into correctional facilities, places of new beginnings, and our partnership comes on since 1991, contributing to a just, peaceful and safer South Africa with victims at the center of this restorative justice process. So I trust that we will journey together with you through this process and also give you much information, but more practical than theory. I will just share with you the outline of our discussion, but we will use real and first-hand stories of the restorative justice and victim-offender dialogue process in South African correctional facilities. First and foremost, we're going to talk about the partnering with the Department of Correctional Services, which is DCS. We're also going to talk and describe the foundation and development of restorative justice and the victim-offender dialogue in the South African correctional facilities. We will also talk about the importance of the multidisciplinary task team, how important it is to work together, and talk about correctional services mandate, the restorative justice in an African context, restorative justice versus retributive justice in South Africa, but also the value of restorative justice in the lives of incarcerated people, describing the reality of the emotional brokenness of incarcerated people with video clips. We also will refer to Dr. Laken's research as a reality, which is a sad reality. We will look at the justice scale, the restorative justice and victim-offender dialogue process. Why do we run this process for 70 hours minimum? And the values of restorative justice and victim-offender dialogue in the lives of victims, also in the lives of the community, and then video clips of victims of crime and an official that will just conclude her personal experience about this restorative justice process. So hang in there. I think it is important for me just to share with the world that Correctional Services and Hope Prison Ministry has an operational agreement, and we're working alongside Correctional Services, as I already said, since 1991, where they allow us to have 24 to 32 offenders on this restorative justice process, where we start with phase 1, 6 hours a day for 6 days. We are in the correctional facility. The female team is working 3 days a week over 2 weeks, and then the 7th day, it's on a Saturday, where the family comes, because they allow us to have the family of the offenders involved in this to participate for the full 6 hours on day 6 and for the females on day 7. Phase 2, we have 3 to 6 hours weekly follow-up sessions where we help them to go through many other challenges that we picked up along the way, and that is over 6 weeks. There's also the counseling to address the guilt, the shame and the regret and the remorse, because the judges will always refer to people that did not show remorse, and moving forward to prevent further crime. Now, many people ask us, how do you get it right? 6 hours a day for 6 days, and also your follow-up. How do you get it right to work with these offenders? Because we struggle in our countries to even get into correctional facilities. While the excitement is that the Department of Correctional Services Act 111 of 1998 in Chapter 4, Section 38 stipulates something that we are very excited about. And it said that as soon as possible after admission of a sentenced offender, such offender must be assessed to determine his or her restorative justice requirements. Now, there are many other requirements, but we're going to focus on this one. And then secondly, what's very exciting, after we started research since 1998 about this process, and we started with restorative justice at Paulsmoor, where Nelson Mandela was also incarcerated, the Minister of Correctional Services, the late Mr. Ben Skosana, he launched restorative justice in South African correctional facilities in November of 2001. Previously, I spoke about a multidisciplinary task team where psychologists and social workers and the chaplains and the case intervention officers, the spiritual and moral development coordinators, they will refer offenders to this restorative justice process, and they will also get on board. They will make sure that they are aware of what's happening in the 70-hour process, because we can't allow offenders to play us off against each other. We need to address this criminal behavior and criminal mindset. Other than that, they will manipulate people. But when we work within a team, we can see how they become careful, because they also sign a document with us that we can share information with the professional staff of correctional services. So they are very careful when it comes to information shared about their criminal behavior. The Department of Correctional Services has a mandate, and their mandate is the Constitution of South Africa of 1996, the Correctional Services Act of 1998, the Criminal Procedures Act of 1977. Obviously, it was amended already, and then also the White Paper on Correctional Services. These are the mandate that allow us to work together even as a multidisciplinary task team.
It was very sad for me not to have my family here on Family Day. Well, it's a pity that I'm only doing this course now in my almost 15 years sentence, because I think it's very important that you have to go through this process, the beginning of your sentence, that your family can walk with you this whole process, because it's not just a year program or just a program to have a certificate. It's difficult for me now at this stage, because my children is not children anymore, they're adults now, although they need healing. And now they've got their own lives now, but I know there's so much hurt, and I know that they need healing.
Many people came to Africa and South Africa. Many people still want to come to Africa and South Africa. That's why it's important for me to share with you the restorative justice in an African tradition. The restorative justice approaches is available for the most severe form of criminal violence. Especially in South Africa, we experience violence, the brutality of the crime that was committed, the evil crime that was committed. Also, we are very strong now to fight against gender-based violence, the sexual, verbal, emotional, and physical abuse of women and children, and based on the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, where we heard about the evil crime during the apartheid years, the brutality, how people were treated by the police as well, and the police and many other people who committed these crimes came forward with the truth. It was painful for the victims' family to hear what happened to their loved ones, but it was necessary for people to come forward and give the truth. And it was also necessary for the victims of crime to listen to what happened to their loved ones, so that they can also experience some closure as well. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission had its strength and its limitations, but also its weaknesses. And that is why we can say today that it worked, because we did not have a civil war after 1994. Many people thought there's going to be many challenges, but the challenges that we experience is now just about crime that is increasing, with all corruption as well. And we trust that our president will take charge of this in terms of bringing people to the book for that. Because the African tradition emphasizes the importance of community and the values of the community, because it's all about Ubuntu. It's about the humanness, the caring, the sharing, the respect, the compassion, qualitative community life in the spirit of family determines and influences everything a person thinks, says and does. The community life is the foundation of society. So come to South Africa, come to Africa. You will experience the warmth of our people amidst all the challenges that you will see. And maybe you will shock to experience as well, but your life will not be in danger. I can guarantee you that if you walk around with us. But also, I would like you to be aware and familiarize yourself with the Restorative Justice Handbook of United Nations, but furthermore, the standard minimal rules for the treatment of prisoners that was revised and adopted as the Mandala Rules in 2015. For us in South Africa, this was a wow when this restorative justice process was even discussed as a way forward in our country. Let me just read to you the rules are known as the Mandala Rules, to honor the legacy of the late President of South Africa, who spent 27 years in prison in the course of his struggle for global human rights, equality, democracy, and the promotion of a culture of peace. So this rules gives guidance to all aspects of prison management. Wow, it is such an honor for us in South Africa to know that the United Nations adopted this as the Mandala Rules. But furthermore, forgiving and being also reconciled is not about pretending that things are other than they are. It's not about turning a blind eye on what was wrong and what went wrong. It means taking what happened seriously and not minimizing it. True reconciliation exposes the awfulness, the abuse, the pain, and the degradation and the truth, according to Arch Desmond Tutu, who was the chairperson of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And so it will be important for you also to research more about the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. At the memorial service of the late Mr. Nelson Mandela, the former President of America, Mr. Barack Obama, said the following: Mandela had changed both laws and hearts, inspiring those around him by reconciling with the jailers who kept him as a prisoner for 27 years. You're not going to take revenge, sir, for what these people did against you? He further said, in trusting others despite the injustices that he suffered, Mandela showed that the cruelty of the past must be confronted with truth, generosity, and inclusion. Wow! That even Mr. Barack Obama confirmed this icon in terms of truth, reconciliation, and restorative justice. The Reverend Jenny Clayton refers in this video clip about the background of offenders. That's why we're starting this restorative justice with the offenders because it's extremely important. They need to be confronted with their own emotional pain because it helps them to understand the pain caused by them on their victims. The pain, the anger, the bitterness is so deep. We sitting there and listen to this. It's not easy where they come from. And hurting people hurts people. So this minimum 70 hours, before we even recommend victim-offender dialogues, we first had to take them through this process. So this restorative justice principles and the path help them to understand the impact of their crime on others.
Locked up in a prison is a lot of broken people. That is why we are passionate in working with those incarcerated, because unless someone is going to walk a road with them in bringing them from brokenness to wholeness, they will continue to act out of brokenness.
I've been more than 26 or 27 years in prison. I've started at the younger, tender age of 15 years. I was 15 when I got sentenced. I've got exposed to a lot of things in prison. I was harassed, I was verbally abused, sexually abused, because guys wanted to just sodomize me because I was a youngster, an attractive youngster. When I grew up, the same things that they wanted to do with me, I was doing it with other guys, brother.
Dr. Clayton, a psychologist, refers to the antisocial behavior in children that are caused by poor parenting, absent fathers, no loving father figure as a role model, and inadequate mothers who fail to properly socialize their child or children. And he claims traits like fearlessness comes out in terms of behavior, aggressiveness, and sensation seeking. Wow! Since we started with this process and deal with offenders incarcerated, we experience the fearlessness, the aggressiveness, the sensation seeking. That's why they join up with the gangs. And when we discuss the depth and the roots of their childhood days, we see, and they are also aware then of the fact that the poor parenting, absent fathers, no loving father figure role model is a challenge, and also inadequate mothers. The child with these traits may express them through violence and antisocial behavior, he said, and it often leads to criminal activities who lacks a sense of moral responsibility. There are people that do not want to take responsibility for their crime for various reasons, and also there is no social consciousness of what they did. They come in and it's almost that they want to go home again. When is my half of my sentence? I want parole, because they do not really take responsibility. But this process helps them to understand the depth of their own background, because again, hurting people hurts people. For every restorative justice and victim offender dialogue practitioners, the following information is not strange to you, but let me just emphasize again why restorative justice, even in a custodial setting, because many people want to know about why do you do it with people that are already sentenced. But we experience over the last few years how important restorative justice is in custodial settings. It's all about restoring, building communities of reconciliation and grace and peace, because we look at the victim and the victim's family. We're looking at the offender, their emotional brokenness, but some of them were also victims of crime too. And we're looking at the community, dealing with their anger and frustration about the crime that happened in their community. Therefore, Correctional Services is saying in their white paper in Chapter 3 that rehabilitation is a societal responsibility, and this allows us to work with offenders, victims of crime, and the family and the community at large. And this photo is just showing us how supportive the Department of Correctional Services is on this process with us in terms of healing and restoration. The Greek philosophy refers to the justice scale as restoring a balance. And I designed this little picture for myself in terms of my teaching and also engaging with victims of crime and the offenders, how we can look at this scale in terms of restoring balance. We have the offender on the one side and the victim on the other side. But when we look at the victim side, if victims do not get the support and empowerment since people got to know about the crime, then victims become very angry and bitter. And if you go to victims 15, 20 years later, you will still find very angry people. And that is why we recommend that people need to support victims as soon as possible when they heard about the crime. Just give you an example. Just since Saturday passed, it's Tuesday today, it's the 11th of August. On Saturday and Sunday and today, I read in the papers of 3 family members that was murdered, an 82-year-old father, a 74-year-old mother, and a 54-year-old daughter. A little girl of 3 years old was shot dead while she was sitting around the fire with her parents outside the house, and a drive-by shooting occurred, and this girl was shot in the head. A young man that was so jealous, he killed his girlfriend or ex-girlfriend and her friend. This morning in the paper, I found a 16-year-old girl was murdered by 5 people because she was lesbian. And another girl was shot dead at the age of 17 years old. Now, if we're not going to support and empower these victims and later want a restorative justice process with them and a victim-offender dialogue, it might be too late. So we are calling on the community leaders. We call on the South African Police Services, social services, the National Prosecuting Authorities, the Department of Health, Justice and Correctional Services, and also everybody that was affected by the crime, come around the victims and the victim's family. Then furthermore, that was very challenging for me. It was a priest that was raped by a colleague of her, also a priest, and she struggles for the last 18 years for justice. And this morning, she went to the main person of this denomination's house, and she placed there all female underwear on the fence there. And she was saying, the reason why I do this, because this is very private clothing. But you know, when you go to the police station, the police ask her, can you tell us, as you explain what happened to you, what color panty did you have on? Wow, that is sad. And that is why it's important that we support victims. On the other hand, we need to look at the offenders, and it is important that offenders taking responsibility for the crime, and they have to give the victims the truth, and the remorse must be experienced, and they have to show that they're turning away from crime and any challenges in terms of criminal behavior. That's why the Department of Correctional Services in our country have an assessment unit, so the offender will be aware of the offender rehabilitation path, about the sentence plan, as I mentioned before. Also, we call on the police to send the report earlier, because after serving half of your sentence, then the police report comes how evil you were. And that's why the report needs to be there earlier. The case officer plays a role, the restorative justice and victim offender dialogue facilitators plays a role, the chaplaincy plays a role in the life of the offender, psychologists, psychiatrists, criminologists, social workers, the case management committee, so that the parole board can make a better decision, but also the family of the offenders and the community leaders is also needed, but also the victims of crime. So if this all happened the way this picture is, this is what Dr. Howard Zehr speaks about, a justice that heals. This is what the Greek philosophy is saying about the justice scale, restoring a balance. And we had experiences like this, and I'm just going to give you one. There was an offender who raped a lady in the same street where he is staying. He denied the crime. He told his parents he's not guilty. He told the community he's not guilty. He pleaded not guilty in court, but they found him guilty. 8 years later, he came on the restorative justice process, and the process challenged him, and then he came to me and he said, you know, I wish I can sit in front of this victim to tell her that I lied. And I said, if you're ready for that, we will make the arrangements with the victim. And 18 months later, as we prepare the victim for a victim-offender dialogue, the victim was prepared to come. We invite also his parents because we wanted them to hear from him the truth. And so this girl said, when he said to her, I lied to you, I raped you, I planned this, she jumped up and said, now I can go home because I feel free. Because the community also victimized me because they blame me for you being in prison. And you know what we did with correctional services on board as well? We took the offender with his permission to the community and the permission of the victim, and we had them in a hall, 400 people in their community. They listened to this offender and saying, I lied to you, I lied in court, I lied to my parents, I lied to the victim, but I want you to know that I'm guilty. I raped this woman. You know, the community embraced him, but also apologized to the victim. And so if I look at this story, I experience a justice that heals and restoring a balance. So this picture is always significant for me. Oh, this picture looks really overwhelming, but this is our 70-hour process with our restorative justice participants. Many organizations is using the same concept in terms of the restorative justice process, looking at the crisis and looking at the denial of offenders, and there is no freedom, but also looking at what is crime and why crime, and also examining the crime and the roots and looking at solutions, taking responsibility, accountability, confessions, repentance, forgiveness, where many people struggle even to forgive themselves, and restitution. Now, in our country, offenders can't give back money to the victims, but there is something that they can give back that is also accepted as a form of restitution, and that is to give them the truth, as we will look at the next slide as well, before we can look at this whole concept of reconciliation. Many people commit crime, they just want to say, please forgive me and give me a hug. They want to reconcile with people immediately, but we see in this journey, it's a process for personal restoration, wholeness and healing, and to move on. We need to take them through this process. Now, this is the first 36 hours of the restorative justice process, where I spoke about the 6 hours a day for 6 days. So I think you can understand why we spend 6 hours a day with a group of offenders for 6 days, and then the 8-week follow-up sessions as well. But in this process, you have to come and observe the impact of this information and the practical stories that goes with this in terms of the offenders that realize the crisis, the damage caused by crime, and many of them stop denying their crime. And you will see some video clips where people came to the front. Some of them, almost 80% of the group, will come to the front and they will say that we lied in court, we lied to our families, but when we are confronted by the victims and our families, we will give them the truth. That is a form of restitution as well. You are also aware of the restorative justice principles in terms of recognizing that crime damage relationships, and this relationships needs to be addressed, and there must be an encouragement for them to repair their damaged relationships by taking responsibility, thinking different about crime and criminal behavior, and to focus on the harm they caused as well. And so we will bring this information more to a reality in terms of some of the video clips that we will play for you, where offenders really embrace this restorative justice principle. And now he's here since 2002, in this case, 18 years. And now mother wants to know, what do you say? Now, Paul, short and sweet is the answer. You know alone what you will answer your mother. Okay? And for now, it can just be a no or a yes. And that's your decision. You will never be forced to answer your mother what we want you to answer. Okay? And then we can rather deal with it after that, but for now, that's the burning question for mommy. Dit is wat mommy wil weet. Het jy dit gedoen, my kind? Is alright?
Okay, mama, ek wil nie meer vir jou lieg nie, man. Wat nie. Maar ek het dit gedoen. Ek weet dit gaan vir jou sê. Jammer. Ek het die woorde om te sê.
Wow. This is a confession after 18 years. Are you family? Your brother, come stand with him. Stand with him. A confession after 18 years. Brother and sister. Mom, do you want to sit down? Kom staan by hom, Kom staan by hom. His sister is saying to him, I still love you. I still love you. Do you remember this mother that shared that she only started with this restorative justice process after being incarcerated for 15 years of a life sentence, and that her family were not at process number 1. And here is a picture, and unfortunately we do not want to expose their identity. Here is a picture where she reconciled with her son after 7 years. And the next picture will also show the two of them alone together, and that was so powerful and significant. So healing and restoration, even amongst the family members, is extremely important. We experience the privileges for incarcerated people to be part of this restorative justice process. And we also want to point out, in South Africa, according to our constitution, the rights of victims, the right to be treated with fairness and with respect for dignity and privacy, the rights of to offer information, the rights to receive information, the rights to protection, and the rights to assistance, the rights to compensation, the rights to restitution. Unfortunately, these rights are not often met, and that makes victims very, very angry. Offenders may not have been able to compensate with finances also, and some people have that expectation. But as I said, that taking responsibility for the crime also give the victim some kind of closure, and giving them the truth also give them some kind of closure. Many people doesn't like the word closure because they said, I don't want to close this chapter, then I must forget about my child that was murdered, or my husband that was murdered, or my wife that was murdered, but at least it brings some closure to many people when offenders take responsibility and give the victims the truth. But this is the rights of the victims. And in the restorative justice process and the victim-offender dialogue process, the right to offer information, the right to receive information comes out in the dialogue, where they can ask questions, and they can ask why, as you will see in a video clip of a victim also. On the basis of the rights to victims, on the second day of our restorative justice process, we start with this clip where we have 1 or 2 or 3 victims, not direct to their crime, to come and share their story. You will listen to a victim in a little while that always will come and share her story of a father that was murdered. But when we discuss this, we share with them about the ripple effect of crime. It is not just the victim, and in case of the death of the victim that was affected, it is also the victim's entire family. Their own family as offenders, families was also affected. The community at large was affected. What about the ambulance services, the police, the forensics? They were also affected. Correctional services need to accept you no matter what you did and what evil and brutal your crime was. They have to accept you if the court sentenced you to imprisonment. So they are also affected because of the criminal behavior of the people being incarcerated. So we bring under the offender's attention what victims experience, and you can see it there about disempowerment, the loss of safety and disrespect, but also the emotions of the victims. And the sad reality is, when I look at these emotions and I go to victims' homes, and you experience the same emotions even 10, 15, 20 years later, even 23 years later. But it is important that offenders also understand what victims want. They want to be empowered. They want truthful answers. They want offenders to take responsibility, and victims want to tell their story face to face to the offenders. One victim's sister said that I just need 10 minutes with this offender to tell him in his face he must rot in prison. We went through the process, we allowed that, and 2 hours later the same person jumped up and asked, can I give him a hug? Why? Because the puzzle is completed. He gave us the truth and we experienced his remorse. That was a sense of restitution again, because victims want to experience themselves the remorse of offenders. We don't have to go and tell the victims that Johnny or Sarah is remorseful, but also that the reaction of some victims is also a reality, that some victims will never forgive. So offenders will say, so if they don't want to forgive me, why must I go through this process? We are telling them it is not just about forgiveness. You need to take responsibility, give the victims the truth, and you need to express how do you feel for what you did. If they don't want to forgive you, as long as you took the responsibility and apologized to them. But some victims also want to take revenge. And unfortunately, we buried many of our restorative justice participants that they didn't get involved in crime again, most of them, but because of the crime life that they live, revenge was also taken. So this is a reality. So crime has a ripple effect, but when we discuss this also with victims, they feel also empowered that we recognize them on this process as well. And this is where there's a turning point of the offenders. And again, I refer to video clips. You will find a video clip when victims come and share. The response of the offenders is overwhelming. Many of them even walk away from gangsterism, even knowing that they might be killed by the end of the day. And they said, I'm finished with this because I realized the impact of the crime on my victims and my victims' family, and also the community and my own family. I don't think I will ever forget this picture where the offender in the green shirt, the same color that I've got on today, killed his wife in the presence of his 8-year-old son. And this son is now 22 years old. He's standing between my PA, Mrs. Neva McGregor, and his grandmother. He killed his wife in front of that boy when he was 8 years old. His sister on the far right of me and on the left of you, or depends on where you sit in front of your computer, she was 5 years old when her mother was killed by the father. 10 years later, we had a victim-offender dialogue, 2 sessions with this family. Some of the brother-in-laws that was also in the first session is not on this picture, but this day was the first time that this offender met with his in-laws and his 2 children after 10 years. And this clip and the next 2 clips will just point out to you the significance of this restorative justice and victim offender dialogue process. This is, for me, a powerful clip. My PA, Neva, was extremely instrumental in this process, in getting these people to the session, and we just experienced once again a justice that heals, restoring a balance.
The day she was supposed to appear in the court, I said to myself, I will never go to the court because I will never get my child back. But at the end of the day, because of prayers and talking to other people about it, I even heal myself and see to it that I must come so that Tenjiwe can also be healed. On my personal view, I feel that I'm healed with what she said today.
I was raped when I was 7 years old. That's not a so what situation. There was a man who came into my life, and he became friends with our family slowly. He earned my trust as a child so that he could betray me and rape me. When I think of it now, it wasn't just rape. Because so many things were stolen from me. He stole my trust. He betrayed me. He violated me. He stole my voice, would have a reaction like, so what? You must just get over it. And I want to share with you because at the time, a part of me believed it and thought, why can't I just get over it? Because if everybody's saying it's a so what, maybe it is like that. But today I know it's not so simple. And that their mentality was wrong. And anyone who can say pain from being a victim of crime is so what, and you must just get over it, that's a lie. This crime happened when I was 7 years old, and it took me to the age of 17 to realize what had happened. And by that time, I had already started drinking and smoking and doing drugs. I was running away from, I had these terrifying nightmares. When I was 18 years old, I was put into a psychiatric hospital. I didn't choose to be there, but my mind was so broken. They took me in by force and they locked me up. And what happened to the man who did this to me? He left. We didn't hear from him. A few years ago, I heard that he died. But he was never brought to justice. He never had to get locked up. I was the one that was locked up. I was trapped. It still affects me what I went through. By God's grace, I am married to an amazing man who is patient and loving. But we have a reality in our marriage that I'm still affected by fear. My dignity and my self-worth was stolen from me. There's very few people who will be able to share this in such an open way. But and I don't know what you're here for. I choose to come and speak, and I choose to be vulnerable because I have a belief that you can be different, that you can make a difference. I believe that there are answers that some of your victims need to hear. But if your victim is sitting out there and it's a crime like my crime, don't think that they will be able to just open up to you the way that I am. There are times where, I told you, it's not just a rape. He stole so many things from me. No truth in my life is that speaking about it set me free. Speaking about it was the beginning of my healing.
I want to introduce you to somebody I loved very, very, very dearly. And that is the gorgeous man I called my daddy. And we all have a daddy, whether he was good, whether he was bad. Mine wasn't perfect. He was no angel. But I loved him. It was my daddy. It was the guy on whose lap I could sit. And the first man who ever said to me, "You are so beautiful." Even though I maybe wasn't. But at that stage, guys, I just loved him so much. And like Jonathan says, he's been gone for close to 20 odd years now, and I still love him so much. And it's important for your victims to know that you know they were loved. And it's important for you to know that your victims' families will miss them forever. Ever and ever and ever. Every single Father's Day, every single Mother's Day, every single birthday, every single Christmas, you name it. The victim's family, they yearn just for one more chance to hear the words, "I love you," or "Daddy, I love you." Just one more time. For lunch, everything was, the tables, the food was cooked, not a great meal. And my granny and grandpa says, "But where's Graham?" And his wife said, "No, he was so upset because him and Jennifer had this massive fight. So he went for a walk, he's not back yet." They're like, "Sure, that's not him, he missed church. He never misses church." "Yeah, but I'm sure he'll be back now." And she dished out a nice plate of food for him, and they ate. 3 o'clock, Granny and Grandpa said, "No, something is wrong. It's not him. He will never do this to his parents if he expects them." So they call my uncle. He just had his accidentally cut off his hand. And he was like coming there and says, "But where's Graham?" And everybody started looking for him. 2 days they were looking for him. People phoned me like, "Jennifer, what did you say to him that made him disappear?" And I thought, okay, I'm sure he's on his way to me then in Joburg, because I'm there, so maybe he's coming to make right with me. And I'm like expecting him to walk through the door any minute. 2 days later, they found a body in the Liesbeek River. Never ever thought it could be him, right? You hear it on the radio, they found this body, whatever, and then they found him with a crossbow in his head. It's like, sure, a crossbow. And they said maybe he was involved with some syndicate or with something. I'm like, I don't understand. It just doesn't make sense. In the meantime, his wife still goes to do her hair, and she just does everything she usually does. And we like, where could he go to? I never, ever, ever got the chance to say to him, "Daddy, I'm sorry. Never ever. I never got the chance to say to him, forgive me, Daddy, for being disrespectful, for throwing the phone down in your ear. To say I love you. Who of you has got that somebody in your lives that you know you need to make right with? Is it your mother? Is it your father? Is it your child? Is it your ex-wife? Is it your girlfriend? Who is that one person that you go and sleep at night and you don't make right? You might never, ever, ever get that chance again. I want to show you where it happened. He was asleep in his bed, and we did have a fight. He went to bed, he went to sleep, and as I say, they found his body floating in the river. About 2.5 days later, none of us can understand what happened. What happened? I want to show you something. You saw the picture of my father, the daddy I loved with all my heart. This is what waited for us in that mortuary. Is that my daddy?
No.
Unfortunately, yes it is. That is what victims need to go and find when somebody killed them and ran away and lied. You don't expect to see that. My uncle had to go in there, look at it like, is it him? Can't be. Somehow, I'm not sure. The fingerprint expert eventually identified him as Victor Graham William Chatburn, my daddy.
For all the years, we always respect the religion and the faith of other people. But our organization is a Christian organization, and our foundation is the Word of God as we look at justice, reconciliation, healing, deliverance, salvation, reconciliation, forgiveness, and repentance. But believe it or not, we invite all kinds of religions onto this restorative justice process, because we have an orientation prior to the process, and there we will explain to them that this process is based on Christian principles, but if you join us voluntarily, we will respect your faith or your religion. And more than 30%, sometimes 40-45% are from other religions that sign up for this process, and no one up till today ever complained by the Department of Correctional Services about proselyting or that we try to change their mindset. Everything is about their own conviction, and they need to make decisions on their own conviction, and that's why we accept them on this process. Professor Baz Dreisinger from the United States of America, a Jewish professor, she came and observed our process for 36 hours, and she observed the different religions on our process and how we respect people, and she told us never to stop with this process. You must read her book, Incarcerated Nations, and in this book, chapter 2, she explains her journey of 36 hours with us at Paulsmoor Correctional Center. And so we will continue to reach out to people no matter what their faith or their religion is, and we will continue to journey with people in terms of healing and restoration, and to come alongside them so that they can also work through the guilt, the shame, and the regret. And we help many people. We even employed now as an organization people that we worked with inside, and now they're working with us. They are now our colleagues, and many of them our group facilitators at our restorative justice process. Is that not wonderful? So come to South Africa and be part of this excellent process, as many people came and they witnessed this, and they will go back and say this was a very good experience for them. I trust that this restorative justice process in custodial settings here in South Africa will be able to help you to realize that this process is much needed in correctional facilities. But in conclusion, I want to put it very simply: restorative justice may not be a solution to all crime, and it may not transform all offenders, but it is certainly a better response to crime than our traditional understanding of justice. And so we need to look, why is this that this process is not a solution to all crime? And I'm just going to share with you the reasons why, and that is what we experience with our offenders in our country. Some choose not to be truthful. They don't want to give the answers that the victims want. And they will either give half the truth but not everything for some reason. And some don't want to answer confrontational questions. Many family members came already to confront the offenders in this restorative justice and victim-offender dialogue process. They want to know, what did you do with our loved one's body? There was someone even that killed his own mother. Up till today, the family don't know where the body is. So they don't want to be confronted with this, because we suspect that maybe they killed other people as well and buried them at the same place. So if they're going to show where the body is, there might be more bodies, because the gangsterism in our country is rife. And we hear about these stories all the time, but also the temptation of continuing with the gangs and that old lifestyle. They are so tempted to be in that, because that also gives them some sensation, some power and a rank within the gang. And there is no sign of determination for them to change, because they're so comfortable in that lifestyle that, why must I change? I'm okay like this. And they don't want to deal with painful and shameful issues. They don't want to go back to what they cause in the lives of people. But also many of them are too institutionalized and living with a mask. They are very, very good and impressive in your presence, but walking away to their friends inside of the prison, they just the same again. But we experience that many offenders went through this restorative justice process. They experience their healing, their restoration, and many of them gave their victims or the victim's family the truth. And so we want to encourage you to consider this restorative justice process in your custodial settings. It is possible. If the Truth and Reconciliation Commission was possible in South Africa with violent crimes that took place, then we should not stand back for violent crimes and violent and evil criminals. We should know that healing and restoration is possible. And I thank you for listening to this presentation.
Tell us your restorative justice experience, just the day one.
Oh my gosh, it's unexplainable. I wish this started a long time ago. I'm so impressed. I am so impressed. I wish another 30 can come and attend another 30, another 30, another 30. Oh my gosh. Clayton, you don't have an idea.
Wonderful.